The Russia force inside Ukraine is now below 90% of its available combat power. In addition to problems getting food and fuel to its units, the Russian military has had to take soldiers out of the fight due to frostbite, according to the official. Meanwhile, Ukraine has repeated a call to Western leaders to supply Kiev with advanced weapons to fight Moscow's slowly advancing troops a month after their invasion. Ukrainian presidential advisory Andriy Yermak said, "Our armed forces and citizens are holding out with superhuman courage, but we cannot win a war without offensive weapons, without medium-range missiles that can be a means of deterrence." The appeal comes shortly after Russia announced it had deployed hypersonic missiles on the battlefield close to Ukraine's border with NATO member Romania in what analysts said was the first use of such weapons in the world. Yermak also said it was impossible for Ukraine to effectively defend itself without a reliable air defense system that shoots down enemy and ballistic missiles from a great distance. And although Russian troops are trying to push west along Ukraine's Black Sea coast towards Odessa, they have so far failed to encircle the city of Mykolaiv that stands in the way. A senior U.S. defense official said Russian forces have not moved closer to the capital, even though parts of the suburbs of Irpin, Bucha, and Gostomel remain under Russian control. Jake Sullivan, the U.S. National Security Advisor, said Moscow will never truly win the war. Take a look.
Whether Russia takes a city or takes a town or takes more territory, they are never going to be able to achieve the purpose that they set out, which was to subjugate this country, to bring this country to heel, because the Ukrainian people have made very clear that they will not be subjugated no matter what it takes.
Now, Ukraine's strategic city of Mykolaiv is holding out against the Russian invasion, in part due to the tenacity of its residents. They are determined to stay and defend it despite incessant bombardment. The southern city is a key obstacle for Russian forces trying to move west from Crimea to take Odessa, Ukraine's major port on the Black Sea, and it has taken a battering in the more than 3 weeks since Russian troops invaded. Meanwhile, Russia's investigative committee has opened a criminal case against the popular Russian journalist Alexander Nevzorov for spreading false information about the Russian army in Ukraine. Take a look.
Комитетом России возбуждено уголовное дело в отношении журналиста Александра Невзорова. Он подозревается в публичном распространении под видом достоверных сообщений заведомо ложной информации о действиях вооруженных сил Российской Федерации. По данным следствия, несмотря на имеющиеся официальные опровержения, Невзоров разместил на своих публичных страницах в Инстаграм и YouTube заведомо ложную информацию, в которой содержались сведения об умышленном обстреле вооруженными силами Российской Федерации родильного дома в городе Мариуполь. Публикации сопровождались постановочными фотографиями украинских СМИ с изображениями мирных граждан, якобы пострадавших от обстрела. В настоящее время следствием принимаются меры к установлению местонахождения Невзорова в целях проведения с ним следственных и процессуальных действий.
This is Alexander Nevzorov, and he is the first prominent political reporter and commentator to be probed for spreading false information about the Russian army under new legislation introduced after President Vladimir Putin sent troops to Ukraine on February 24. The investigative committee's announcement came on the 27th day of what Moscow calls its special military operation in pro-Western Ukraine, which has claimed thousands of lives and displaced some 10 million people. A statement said that Nevzorov published deliberately false information about the deliberate shelling by Russia's armed forces of a maternity hospital in the city of Mariupol. The publications were accompanied by inaccurate photographs of civilians affected by the shelling, according to the investigators, adding that the pictures had been first published by Ukrainian media. Investigators also said they were seeking to establish Nevzorov's whereabouts whereabouts. He is 63 years old and is a veteran Russian journalist and a former member of parliament, and he's believed to be residing outside Russia. Last week, investigators also opened a criminal case against Veronika Belotserevskaya, or Belotserevskaya, a Russian blogger and publisher who lives in France, over spreading false information that Russian armed forces were targeting Ukrainian civilians, including children. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov today accused the United States of seeking to hinder Moscow's talks with Ukraine aimed at ending the almost month-long conflict. Take a look.
Переговоры начались. Идут они тяжело, потому что украинская сторона, хотя и вроде выразила понимание тех вещей, которые должны быть согласованы во время переговоров, постоянно меняет свою позицию, отказывается от своих же предложений. Трудно избавиться от впечатления, что их держат за руку американские коллеги, которым... Еще раз, это не про Украину. Это про миропорядок, в котором США хотят быть единоличным, суверенным и доминировать. То есть...
He added that the Americans simply see it as disadvantageous for them for this process to finish swiftly, claiming they are counting on continuing to pump up Ukraine with weapons. Lavrov said that Russia needed to stand firm. He said Western countries want to play some kind of intermediary role, but he said they have red lines. Russia would only use nuclear weapons in the context of the Ukraine conflict if it were facing an existential threat. That, according to Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, telling this to CNN International on Tuesday. He said, "We have a concept of domestic security and it's public. You can read all the reasons for nuclear arms to be used," Peskov said. "So if it is an existential threat for our country, then it can be used in accordance with our concept." Peskov's comments came as interviewer Christian Amanpour pushed him on whether he was convinced or confident that President Vladimir Putin would not use the nuclear option in the Ukrainian context. Days after Russian troops invaded Ukraine, President Putin announced on February 28 that he had put the country's strategic nuclear forces on high alert in a move that sparked a global alarm. Russia maintains the world's largest stockpile of nuclear warheads, and Western defense officials said, following Putin's February announcement, that they had not seen any significant sign of mobilization of Russia's nuclear forces, its strategic bombers, missiles, and submarines. And President Biden is headed to Brussels this week for a series of high-stakes meetings with American allies. And the leaders are expected to discuss imposing further sanctions against Russia. The White House warned that Moscow could be preparing for potential cyber attacks in retaliation for those sanctions. Take a look.
We've previously warned about the potential for Russia to conduct cyber attacks against the United States, including as a response to the unprecedented economic costs that the U.S. and allies and partners impose in response to Russia's further invasion of Ukraine. Today, we are reiterating those warnings, and we're doing so based on evolving threat intelligence that the Russian government is exploring options for potential cyber attacks on critical infrastructure in the United States. So clearly what we're asking for is lock your digital doors, make it harder for attackers, make them do more work, because a number of the practices we include in the fact sheet will make it significantly harder, even for a sophisticated actor, to compromise a network.
President Biden said the government would continue to use every tool to deter, disrupt, and, if necessary, respond to cyber attacks against critical infrastructure. However, he underlined that most critical infrastructure in the country is owned and operated by private entities, which cannot be compelled to take specific cybersecurity measures. U.S. authorities have said that everything from fuel supply routes to water supplies are at risk from cyber attacks, as well as identifying Russian hackers as one of the main threats. And we go again to the war in Ukraine. Take a look. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said almost 100,000 people are still trapped in the ruins of Mariupol, though over 7,000 escaped in the last 24 hours. Let's take a look.
Станом на цей день у місті перебувають близько 100 тисяч людей у нелюдських умовах, в повній блокаді, без їжі, без води, без ліків, під постійними обстрілами, під постійним бомбардуванням. Вже не перший тиждень ми намагаємося організувати стабільні гуманітарні коридори для маріупольців. І майже всі наші спроби, на жаль, зриваються російськими окупантами. Обстрілами. Продовжуємо працювати на різних рівнях і заради того, щоб спонукати Росію до миру, до припинення цієї жорстокої війни. Працюють українські представники в переговорах, які продовжуються фактично щоденно. Складно, дуже, часом скандально, але крок за кроком йдемо вперед.
Human Rights Watch describes the southern city as a freezing hellscape, riddled with dead bodies and destroyed buildings. The Pentagon said Russia is pummeling the city using artillery and long-range missiles and from naval ships deployed in the nearby Sea of Azov. In other news, a man wielding a knife stabbed several people and ran over another in southern Israel on Tuesday, killing 4 in one of the deadliest attacks in the country in recent years. The assailant, who Israeli media have identified as a Bedouin man who previously tried to join the Islamic State group, was shot dead by armed locals following the attack in the southern city of Beersheba, according to police. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett promised to crack down on terrorists following the bloodshed that began shortly after 4 p.m. and unfolded at a petrol station and on a street outside a nearby shopping center. Lira Shiran, a 25-year-old who was washing her car at the petrol station when the rampage began, said she saw the attacker holding a long knife like a sword while spinning around and looking for people to stab. According to police and the Magen David Adom emergency medical responders, the assailant stabbed one woman at the gas station, used his car to run over a man in his 60s on a bicycle, and then stabbed several others outside the shopping center before he was shot. Police have not officially identified the suspect, but multiple Israeli media outlets reported the attacker was Mohammed Abu Al-Kiyan, a former school teacher in his 30s from the Bedouin community of Hura near Beersheba, who was previously convicted over seeking ties with ISIS and preaching jihadist ideology. In 2015, Israel arrested 6 Bedouins, including 4 teachers, for allegedly supporting Islamic State. And the news continues. Here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Paano makakaboto yun? May kapansanan nga.
Paano naman sa mga no read, no write? Hindi pa rin pwedeng bumoto.
Pwedeng bumoto. Ang mga illiterate o ang mga hindi marunong magbasa o magsulat, maging ang mga PWD, may karapatan silang bumoto.
Paano?
Maaaring magdala ng mga kasama ang mga illiterate at PWD para maalalayan sila sa kanilang pagboto o sa mga pagkakataong kailangan nila ng tulong.
Kahit sino, pwede nilang isama?
No, dapat kamag-anak na kadugo ng botante ang kasama nila. Magdala lamang sila ng PWD ID. Ano bang kapansanan ng kakilala mo?
Ayun, nakahiga lang eh. Hindi makabangon. May sakit daw siyang love nut.
Hindi kapansanan yun. Alam ko na. Eto sa balutamol, balutromycin. Pakainin nyo para ganahan. Para sa karagdagang kaalaman, makipag-ugnayan lang sa pinakamalapit na barangay o bisitahin ang COMELEC website.
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Several European countries, including Germany, France, Italy, and Britain, lifted their COVID curbs too brutally and are now seeing a rise in cases likely due to the more transmissible BA2 variant, according to the World Health Organization. Take a look.
На протяжении последних 2 недель в 6 странах, расположенных в этой части региона, число случаев COVID-19 вирусли более чем двое. Как ожидалось, волна омикрона движется на восток. В 10 государственных стенах восточной части региона уже выявлен этот вариант.
The WHO Europe Director Hans Klug is telling a press conference in Moldova that he was optimistic but vigilant about the pandemic's development in Europe. COVID is on the rise in 18 out of 53 countries in the WHO European region, he said. And he said the countries where we see a particular increase are the United Kingdom, Ireland, Greece, Cyprus, France, Italy, and Germany. He also said the main reason behind the increase was likely the BA2 variant, which experts say is about 30% more contagious but not more dangerous than its predecessor, BA1. But in addition, those countries are lifting the restrictions brutally from too much to too few, he said. He also stressed that in the face of an Omicron tidal wave and with Delta still circulating widely in the East, now was not the moment to lift measures that we know work in reducing the spread of COVID. And these measures include avoiding crowded locations, wearing masks indoors, improving ventilation, and using rapid tests to identify cases early. And speaking of the European Medicines Agency's bi-weekly press conference, the EMA's vaccine strategy head said that scrapping coronavirus rules in many countries may have played a role in the current rise in coronavirus cases. Take a look.
The results of a pivotal normal life, we notice that infection rates are increasing again in some member states after the steady decrease we witnessed over the past few weeks. These appear to be at least driven by the increasing circulation of the BA2 subvariant of Omicron, which seems to be more transmissible than other variants of SARS-CoV-2. We are continuing to assess data on the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines and treatments against Omicron and its subvariants of concern. There is at present no indication that immune evasion after vaccination is significantly different with the Omicron BA2, while the pattern of activity of monoclonal antibodies can vary significantly with each Omicron subvariant. For this reason, we continue to urge all citizens to get vaccinated and for those eligible to get a booster shot as well. We can see a pattern that countries with high vaccination rates are reporting significantly lower death and hospitalization rates. In statements from some vaccine developers that stress the need for a second booster shot. I want to reiterate that from a regulatory point of view, there is not yet enough evidence, either from clinical trials or from real-world evidence, supporting a recommendation on the need for a second booster shot in the general population.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden's chief spokeswoman Jen Psaki said she had tested positive for COVID for the second time, but that the U.S. president was negative. The press secretary said she had held 2 socially distanced meetings with Biden, who is vaccinated a day earlier. However, the president tested negative today via PCR test, she said, in a statement adding that Biden's 79 is not considered a close contact as defined by the top U.S. health agency. She also tested positive in October last year after deciding not to travel to Europe with Biden when members of her family contracted the virus. Psaki said she had mild symptoms for which she credited the COVID-19 vaccine and said she was working from home. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said the country's strict COVID-19 restrictions will be relaxed this week. She also said vaccine passes and scanning codes would no longer be compulsory from April 4, and most vaccine mandates would be dropped. Let's listen in.
5th of April. And so, from 11:59 p.m. Monday, 4 April, vaccine passes will no longer be required to be used as part of the COVID-19 protection framework.
Comes a week after Ardern outlined plans to open New Zealand's borders earlier than originally scheduled. New Zealand was widely praised for keeping COVID-19 out of the community for extended periods during the pandemic. but it's currently experiencing a wave of Omicron variant infections with almost 21,000 new cases recorded on Tuesday. However, the population is highly vaccinated and there have been just 177 coronavirus-related deaths in a population of 5 million. Ardern said vaccine mandates for the police, military, and education sector would be dropped. And as I earlier said, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said vaccine mandates for the police, military, and education sector would be dropped, although they would remain for healthcare and border workers. She denied the move was linked to protests in Wellington, which ended in rioting earlier this month as police removed a camp of anti-vaccine demonstrators that occupied the grounds outside Parliament for 3 weeks. Take a look.
Today, and I made it clear right here in this theaterette that when we came to the point where we would remove passes and make changes to mandates, it would be because it's safe to do so, not because anyone arrived on the front lawn of Parliament.
And we have some good news to our commuters. President Duterte announced the light railway line would open free rides to the public for a month starting next week. He made the announcement during the inauguration of the completion of the rehabilitation of the 21-year-old rail line on Tuesday. Take a look.
Without the technical competences and professional aid of our service providers from Sumitomo Corporation, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, and TES Philippines Incorporated. With the joint effort of these companies and the DOTR, we have increased our train speed from 25 kilometers per hour to 60 per hour, while the time interval between train arrivals has improved to 8 to 10 minutes. Also, before, we only had 12 to 15 operating units. Now there are already 18 to 22 trains to serve the people. This progress will decrease, if not altogether stop, the number of unloading incidents in our stations. In addition to this, we made the MRT more accessible for everyone, since all the elevators and escalators are now fully operational. I'd like to announce that Secretary Tugade and I decided that the MRT3 rides will be free, hindi naman forever, from March 28 to April 30, 2022. Maraming salamat at mabuhay kayong lahat.
President Duterte has warned that the communist movement has been able to infiltrate various political parties led by a presidential aspirant. The president made the revelation in his pre-recorded talk to the people aired Tuesday morning. While he refused to name the presidential candidate, he said the political parties working with communist terrorists come from the opposition. Take a look.
At this time, I am not ready to mention the names or name, but meron tayong mga partido headed by someone running for the presidency, and yet they are also playing into the hands of the communists mismo. I think they have been infiltrated. Kaya ako, pati yung gobyerno, yun ang worry ko. Actually, yun ang talagang nasa isip ko. Pag hindi kaya na itong LCAC, it's a very good program. It has helped a lot of the rebels find their way into the mainstream of society. Akong inuudyo ko lahat na huwag kayong sumali dyan sa mga rebelde na kasagwat yung mga membro ng mga political parties sa kabila.
In a taped interview with SMNI on March 12, the president said the government is monitoring several members of the opposition and communist rebels who might be colluding to disrupt the May 9 national and local elections. The president, citing an intelligence report, bared the supposed groupings of the communist insurgents and opposition members who belong to Yellow, the color associated with the opposition Liberal Party. In a virtual presser, acting presidential spokesperson and communications secretary Martin Andanar said the president will ensure a clean, honest, and credible elections. And a black box from the crashed China Eastern airliner was recovered on Wednesday as investigators tried to determine what made the jet carrying 132 passengers nosedive into a mountainside in southern China. The cause of the disaster has mystified aviation authorities who have scoured rugged terrain for clues, finding no survivors from what is almost certain to be China's deadliest plane crash in nearly 30 years. The stricken jet, a Boeing 737-800, was equipped with 2 flight recorders, one in the rear passenger cabin tracking flight data, and the other a cockpit voice recorder. The Boeing 737-800 plane went down nosedive near Wuzhou in southern China on Monday afternoon after losing contact with an air traffic control. President Xi Jinping was swift to order a probe into the crash, dispatching senior Communist Party officials to the scene, including close aide Vice Premier Liu He. China Eastern said the crashed plane, which was nearly 7 years old, had met all airworthiness requirements pre-flight. Aviation authorities said more painstaking evidence gathering was needed before coming to any conclusions. And as always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert, stay informed, because we live in interesting times. Good night.